What if I told you that one of the most powerful countries in the world woke up one day and simply said, "We're not paying our debts"? No warning, no plan, just nothing. Now here's the real question. What can anyone actually do about it? You can repossess a car. You can seize a house. But what do you do when an entire nation goes broke? The answer will surprise you. When a regular person or a company goes bankrupt, the process is pretty clear. They owe money they can't pay. A court steps in. Assets are seized. Debts are restructured or forgiven. It's messy, but there's a legal framework. But countries? There's no international bankruptcy court. There's no global judge who can walk into Washington or Ankara or Buenos Aires and say, "All right, auction off the national parks to pay your creditors." Instead, when a country can't pay its debts, we call it a sovereign default. And while the word default sounds almost polite, the consequences are anything but. A sovereign default happens when a government fails to make payments on its debt, either missing interest payments, refusing to repay the principal, or simply announcing it won't honor its financial obligations. And here's the thing, this isn't rare. According to historical data, there have been over 250 sovereign defaults since 1800. Some of the world's most prominent economies have been through it. Let's back up. How does a wealthy, functioning country end up in a position where it literally cannot pay its bills? It usually starts with borrowing. Governments regularly borrow money through bonds to fund infrastructure, social programs, military spending, and more. This is completely normal. The US, Japan, Germany, virtually every major economy carries significant debt. The problem begins when a country borrows more than it can realistically pay back, especially if it borrows in foreign currencies like the US dollar or the euro. Here's why foreign currency debt is particularly dangerous. If you borrow in your own currency, you can technically print more money to repay it. Not ideal, it causes inflation, but it's an option. But if you borrowed in dollars and your currency collapses, you suddenly owe twice as much in real terms. Add to that political instability, falling commodity prices, rising interest rates, capital flight, and a manageable debt load can spiral into an unmanageable crisis very quickly. Think of it like this. Imagine you took out a mortgage in Swiss francs while earning income in Turkish lira. If the lira weakens dramatically, your debt suddenly feels enormous, even though nothing about your house changed. Argentina, the serial defaulter. Argentina holds a record that nobody wants. It has defaulted on its national debt 9 times. 9. The most dramatic was in 2001, when the country went through an economic meltdown so severe that it had 5 presidents in just 2 weeks. Citizens stormed banks. ATMs were emptied. The peso lost 70% of its value. Unemployment hit 25%. Greece, the Eurozone crisis. In 2010, Greece revealed that its budget deficit was far larger than previously reported. The country couldn't borrow at affordable rates and needed a massive international bailout from the EU and IMF. Greece implemented brutal austerity measures, slashing pensions, cutting public sector wages, raising taxes, leading to years of recession and enormous social suffering. Zimbabwe, when printing money goes wrong. Zimbabwe's story is perhaps the most extreme. In the 2000s, facing debt and economic mismanagement, the government simply printed more and more money. The result? Hyperinflation so severe that at its peak, prices were doubling every 24 hours. The central bank printed a $100 trillion note, which couldn't buy a loaf of bread. The currency was eventually abandoned entirely. Russia, the 1998 ruble crisis. Even Russia, a nuclear superpower with vast natural resources, defaulted in 1998 following the collapse of oil prices and political instability after the Soviet Union's breakup. The ruble lost 75% of its value in weeks. Banks collapsed. Middle-class savings evaporated overnight. So a country defaults. Now what? Unlike a business, it doesn't shut down. It can't be liquidated. The country still exists. People still need services. The government still needs to function. What typically happens is negotiation. The country goes to its creditors, other governments, international banks, bondholders, and says, "We can't pay you what we promised, but here's what we can offer." This usually involves what's called a debt restructuring, extending repayment timelines, reducing interest rates, or in extreme cases, outright haircuts, where creditors agree to accept less than they're owed. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, often steps in with emergency loans, but with strict conditions. Governments must implement austerity measures, cutting spending, raising taxes, privatizing state assets. These measures are deeply controversial because while they help stabilize finances, they also cause real hardship for ordinary citizens who had nothing to do with the original borrowing decisions. Here's the good news. Countries can, and do, recover. Iceland is a great example. In 2008, Iceland's banking system collapsed in one of the worst financial crises relative to the size of any economy in history. But Iceland did something controversial. Instead of bailing out the banks, it let them fail. It imposed capital controls, devalued its currency, and prosecuted the bankers responsible. Within 5 years, Iceland had one of the fastest recoveries in the developed world. Unemployment fell, growth returned, and the country emerged with a much healthier financial system. South Korea in 1997 is another case. Facing a currency crisis, South Korea accepted IMF assistance, implemented painful reforms, and transformed its economy so rapidly that it repaid its IMF loans ahead of schedule. Recovery is possible, but it requires political will, structural reform, and unfortunately, years of economic pain distributed unequally across the population. So, can a country go bankrupt? The honest answer is yes, in everything but name. There's no international bankruptcy court, no official liquidation process. But a country can reach a point where it simply cannot meet its financial obligations, and the consequences can be devastating for millions of ordinary people. The difference between a country and a company is that a country doesn't disappear. It can't close its doors. Its citizens still live there, still need healthcare, education, food, security. And that makes economic crises far more human and far more political than any corporate bankruptcy. The deepest lesson? Debt is not inherently dangerous, but debt without discipline, transparency, or accountability always eventually comes due. And when it does, it's rarely the decision-makers who pay the heaviest price.